Hi everyone, Sandman here. This video is brought to you by a donation from Andrew, and here's what he briefly has to say. Hi Sandman, no topic mate. Just wish I could send you more. Keep up the good work. Well Andrew, thanks for your donation, and I'm sure you're actually going to enjoy me covering the topic of how in Los Angeles the city is proposing that public parks in the area will bar adults unaccompanied by children from entering or even being near playgrounds full of kids. The idea is apparently to keep the spaces free of creepy activity. We know that article, which is the first one in the description, says adults free of children, but we know it's only men that are going to be affected by this. Do you really think the cops are going to ticket a single woman unaccompanied by a child as she sits on a park bench or exercises near the playground? You heard me right, even sitting on a park bench feeding the pigeons, if you don't have any children of your own in the park, is now too creepy for the creep police, and you get ticketed. What's next? A ban on types of unfashionable trench coats that pedophiles like to wear. You'd think that this is a new law, but apparently it's based on one in New York where the police, a number of years ago, ticketed people for sitting on playground benches, standing around eating donuts, or playing chess, according to the article. This new proposal in Los Angeles would do the same thing and turn men into criminals simply for not having children of their own and accidentally looking at someone else's kid in the playground. This article is misleading because there isn't a war on single people, it's more like a war on single men. Single women will not be targeted, and the article should have put a ban on single men adults near playgrounds as the title, but we all know that would be too obvious and would piss off men by making us think that we were an underclass or something like that. About 4 years ago, we heard stories from Australia's airline Qantas saying that men were too creepy and potential pedophiles, so single men couldn't sit on flights next to unaccompanied minors. Qantas Airlines introduced this policy. I can understand if the minor was alone with an adult he doesn't actually know in a private space, but on an aircraft people have very little room to move around, and everything is absolutely monitored. What's going to happen? Some happy-go-lucky man is going to rub himself off a 10-year-old's arm looking for a happy ending on an airplane. His ending won't be so happy when the plane lands and the cops take him away kicking and screaming to jail. Qantas said that the reason they implemented their policy was because of concerns from parents. In this case, as well as the park issue, it's probably women that are creeped out by single men because either they don't want them near their children, which to some extent is understandable, but it's not like these kids are actually unsupervised. There are often tons of adult eyes on the playground or in an aircraft. With regards to the playgrounds, I think it has a lot more to do with single men approaching single mothers. And the mothers probably don't like it because the majority of the men have not been screened out as potentially not being creepy. This is a way to use the law to keep so-called creepy men away from women. We've seen the same thing in Nottinghamshire last year when Constable Sue Fish made it virtually a hate crime for a guy to walk up to a woman on the street that he doesn't know and start talking to her. Everywhere you look, from New York to Australia, Los Angeles, and even England, there is actually a war being waged on the physical places and restricting the freedoms of association, as well as transportation and leisure activities of single men. Maybe to make life easier, all single men should wear some sort of shaming mark on their clothing, like a Star of David, so that everyone knows they're actually different, and so they can be publicly identified as second-class citizens. At least that way everyone could point at such monstrous outcasts and protect their children, just in case a single man tries to snatch a kid off the playground and eat his liver. There are also other ways that the government wages its war on single men. Although there is no official bachelor tax, married couples receive discounts for filing their taxes in a joint way in Canada, so if you're a single man or a single woman for that matter, you actually get to pay more taxes, and you can't take advantage of the offers the government makes for tax savings if you're married. In a way, it's a phantom bachelor tax because you pay more if you're single than you would if you were married. Other ways the state is waging a war on single men is by offering fewer and fewer scholarships and bursaries for male students going to college. It used to be that when more men were entering college and getting their bachelor's degrees, the state offered women additional monies to help them get into school and compete with men. These programs have been remarkably successful to getting women to make up 60% of students in most colleges and universities. So now it's single men that are struggling to get into college, but where are the subsidies and awards that are actually going to men to help them get into school? Oh, that's right, being a single man means you're privileged, so of course you don't need any additional help. By unleashing this war on single men, the state is doing something it's going to lose in the long term. Single males are smartening up and choosing not to get married because they're being punished. They're also getting into less school debt and buying fewer and fewer homes because they don't have a wife and kids to support. All of that doesn't bode well for the banking sector. The system runs on debt creation, and if single men choose not to basically go to school and get into property debt because after high school they increasingly choose to play video games in their mama's basements, then that means it's women's responsibility to indebt themselves instead and basically keep the entire fractional reserve banking system running. Most men in my circle have no consumer debt, little to no good debt like mortgages, and they also have paid off vehicles and pay everything using cash or debit. As more single men go their own way, the less debt is created and the quicker the system comes to a screeching halt. As single men have taken on less debt, it would actually be interesting to see if women have taken on more. We all know that governments have taken on massive piles of debt to make up for the fact that the people in the United States have been deleveraging. That's why I suggest that men deleverage as much as possible, because at some point the debts will be too big to pay for, and the less debt a man has in his life, the less bankers have to get paid in the long term. The people running the system know that men aren't willing to take on as much debt as women, so that's probably why we're seeing women get more higher paying jobs in our society, because women tend to be short-term thinkers, so they're far more willing to get themselves into debt by buying overpriced homes. Recently I made a video called MGTOW Bachelor Pads, and one real estate agent in Los Angeles said he doesn't like male customers because they tend not to purchase homes, and that female customers are more likely to buy them. I would add one more piece of information to that equation, and say that it's mostly couples and single women purchasing properties in the Western world. They see their homes not as a place to live anymore, but instead as an asset. They don't seem to understand that in the long term, based on the Case-Shiller Home Index, when you take upkeep and other costs into consideration, personal property is actually a losing proposition. You'll never recoup your money unless, of course, there's a housing bubble that you can sell into. But this is a topic I'm going to be covering on a different day. Other ways that society punishes single men and wages war on us is through emotional warfare, trying to convince us to get married. Recently, someone posted on my channel that when a woman mentions to him that he's a good catch, he tells her the word catch is insulting because it insinuates that he's like a fish and the woman is like a fisherman. And I certainly don't need to explain to everyone what it's like going your own way with regards to family gatherings if you're a single man. They might as well hang you up on the ceiling with your balls dangling down so they use them as a piñata. But if they do end up managing to break your nuts, that won't be candy showering down on everyone. But look on the bright side, at least they're helping to keep your balls empty, and they probably fed you as well, and kept your belly full too. Apparently the only place there's no war on single men is in Germany, where single men from all over the Middle East and Africa are finding freedom in the land of rape and welfare. That's probably the only place in the world where you can rape young boys at a community center and get away with it by calling it a sexual emergency. But back in America, I'm sure that if a handsome man was sitting on a park bench near a playground eyeballing all the cutely pathetic single mothers, there would be no problems. If the cops walked over and gave him a ticket, he'd probably have many of those single mother monsters lining up to be his human shields, protecting him from the police and their creep tax. That's what the so-called war on single men is all about. It's really a war on creepy men that the vast majority of women don't want around. The state and single mothers can't gas the true force loneliness / creepy men, so they're trying to make life difficult for them and uncomfortable as much as possible in public, so they stay out of the public eye. In Los Angeles, lawmakers are saying that another reason this legislation is being tabled is because of drug dealing. Because apparently we all know that drug dealers like to sit on park benches next to the jungle gym, awaiting to sell smack to little boys and girls. Only a social justice warrior would come up with such a dumb reason to get rid of all those so-called creepy men. Women in the state just can't come out and say, listen everyone, if you see a creepy man in the park or on an airplane, or if some creepy dude starts a conversation with you, we just want to take his freedom away for doing that. So they come up with excuses like child molestation or misogyny for simply being a man. For women, there will never be a war on single women unless some disease wiped out a huge chunk of the population, and women were then needed to get married and pregnant as quickly as possible to repopulate the planet. That's just about the only way that there would be a war on single women. Then society would see them as useless eaters if they didn't have kids. Otherwise, they would be useful for giving birth. But as it stands, single women can do no wrong and have kittens and rainbows shooting out of their vaginas. The only way there would actually be a war on single women, and an overt war that was basically under the surface, would be if sex robots were invented. Men would then choose to be with machines instead of choosing to get married. But even then, women would get pissed off and they would try to get white knights and politicians to ban sex robots and make sure they continue to keep their power. The war on women will be a covert war from the masculine side, because the inventors of this technology used to replace female functions won't be expecting the backlash that will surely be coming from that. They will wonder all of a sudden why they're the most hated men on the planet. After all, men like Larry Flint and Hugh Hefner were also hated, but the men that developed sex robots, replacements, won't only be hated, but their very lives could come under constant threat, not from women, but from the manginas and white knights that serve them. A war on single women will be fought between manginas and MGTOWs. That's what I'm predicting if someone uses technology to help usher in the second sexual revolution, this one basically targeting towards men. I constantly get messages on my channel saying that Jewish people are behind this. But to that, all I have to say is that I meet a lot of Jewish women and men, and to be honest, there's a huge single Jewish community here in Toronto. Many of those singles will never marry, even if tradition is in the mix. I've met Jewish men working as photographers, DJs, and event planners, and for many of them, their experience with extremely demanding Jewish women means they end up all alone if they can't stomach such a woman. And no, I'm not Jewish. I just think everyone is looking in the wrong causes for this war against men. Do you really think that the police care if a guy is Jewish with regards to issuing him a ticket for basically sitting at a park bench next to a jungle gym? Most Jewish guys are just like you and me, but there are some out there that say they rule the world, and I have one guy making a speech like that, and I'm absolutely terrified to release it because I don't want someone to start a war on Sandman. Anyways, that's all I've got to say for today. Thanks again for your donation, Andrew. Also, don't forget to smash the like button like they do smash hot asses on Pornhub. As well, check out the MGTOW mystery link. As for everyone else out there, please follow me on Twitter or like me on Facebook to get tomorrow's video today. Thanks for taking your daily dose of red pills. And remember, a red pill a day keeps the ballsack piñatas away. So enjoy the rest of your day, and cheers.